Welcome to another episode of Full Circle Podcast. It is your favorite brother, Joseph. It always has been. It always will be, unless someone takes over, which I don't think is going to happen. But welcome to another episode. Just wanted to cue in from where we left off last week. So we were talking about life cycles. We were talking about identifying patterns and finding ways to grow and change from those patterns. Today, I want to continue from that vein and really talk to y'all about growth and having courage to grow, because I think more importantly than just having the idea to grow or even having the motivation to grow, the courage to continue the habits of growth until they become automatic, that is, it can be daunting, but it's worth it. It's very, very, pivotal to the growth that we want to experience and the change that we want to see in our life. And so really want to start with that. I also apologize in advance if I sound a little bit like nasally or whatever. I do have a bit of a cold. But one of the things that I always said when I started this show is that unless I am like stretched out in bed, completely unable to move, incapacitated, whatever, I'm going to be here. I'm going to do this show for you guys. And so I'm not going to let a little bit of a head cold or a little bit of sinus pressure stop me from doing that. So once again, as I always do before I start the show, thank you guys for your support. If you're enjoying this, we're about 16 episodes into this podcast. This, of course, is our 17th episode, but I just want to give all of you a shout out as I do at the beginning. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Thank you for sharing this with friends and even family. And if you haven't done that already and you're, enjoying this podcast, you've been listening, what are you doing? Like, honestly, what are you even doing with your life? That's almost like coming over to your friend's house for a party or an event and not bringing anything. But listen, all you got to do is click a button. So it's free to do that. Go ahead, subscribe to our podcast right now, share it with a friend, and go ahead and follow us on social media at _Full Circle Pod and on TikTok at Full Circle Pod. We've got tons of other links that I've mentioned before. We're starting to get those a bit more upgraded and formatted for what we're doing here, but really want to focus on just, getting more people locked into what we're doing with the podcast. And thank you if you've been part of that already. Okay, so diving right into it, there's this thought that I was having as I was taping the episode last week about cycles of change. And of course, we talked about identifying patterns that you found yourself stuck in, ways that you've been continuing that even subconsciously, and how to break free from those cycles, right? Today, I want to talk to you from the standpoint of intentional growth and having the courage to take steps towards intentional growth. And we're going to talk a little bit about the psychology of how that works, as well as some practical steps, because I'm all about taking practical steps. It's not just information, but it's also application that makes the difference. And so I want to start with this idea. I wrote this down because this thought came to my mind. Growth is the great challenge that requires great courage. Once again, growth is the great challenge that requires great courage. Now, there are some areas of your life and of my life where growing for us doesn't feel as difficult. There's certain things that we might be more motivated to do or inspired to do, or that we enjoy, because that's just part of either our wiring or, it's something that we get a lot of, enjoyment or pleasure out of doing, right? So for me personally, I love pushing myself. When I'm in the gym, if I'm playing basketball and I feel gassed, there are some days where, you're playing and you don't feel as motivated as others, but there's something about when you're down or when you're losing a game for me, or if I'm, in the process of working out and I've got myself on a timer and I'm challenging myself. Okay, 90 seconds. I do feel a little bit tired, but I said I'm going to do 90 seconds. So I'm going to push through that feeling. Something about that motivates me, right? So sometimes there are moments where you have challenges, and those challenges that might stress other people out, they're actually exciting for you, right? So it doesn't necessarily feel like it requires you to be courageous or to really get your game face on, because you either self-motivate or you like a challenge. So if that's you, in this type of a situation, great, kudos to you. We all have that in our lives. But I do believe there are moments where every single thing that we are typically used to doing to get ourselves through difficult moments, every single thing that we're used to doing to get ourselves through the feeling of anxiety, right? We might put on our game face. We might try to, hype ourselves up if you feel anxious. I know there's a practice that a lot of, either it's athletes or musicians, artists, actors, even before scenes, they'll either like chant something, or some people will do push-ups, or they'll do like jumping jacks, something to get their heart rate up before they jump onto the field or before they run out onto the stage and perform, because you're throwing yourself from a kind of more stable, relaxed, calm situation into one that requires great energy. And it's almost like that energy ramp up or acceleration, if you will, the momentum from that will carry you into this just beautiful takeoff, right? This acceleration into a takeoff that won't end. But there are moments sometimes where all of the things that we've done, the habits that we have, formed, or the practices that we like to use to get ourselves past points of difficulty don't work. Or there are moments where we're looking at our lives and we're saying, hey, I'm recognizing that my own personal habits, my bad habits, are actually becoming a hindrance to me living the life that I want to live. I want to take a trip, and I want to go travel all over the world, right? And I want to do it for an extended period of time. But I'm realizing that I'm getting money and I'm spending money. And my desires and my dreams, my goals are not matching my behaviors, right? And there's a temptation to really, in effect, beat ourselves up about that. I want to talk to you guys about a couple of different things today where that's concerned. The first being how you form habits, because there is a lot of psychology surrounding this, and it can be very, very easy to look at where you are and just be like, man, you know what? This is not changing no matter what I do. I've hired a coach, or I've talked to some of my friends about this that are really, really good. And for some reason, they can change, but I can't. So maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm stuck here eternally, right? And so I want to really use this so you can understand how psychology works when it comes to change, so you can feel encouraged and you can feel a sense of empowerment behind your desire to make a change, right? So we're going to talk about the nature of growth and habit formation. We're going to talk about the role that courage, takes in you growing as a person. And then we're going to talk about breaking through resistance and habit change, because those are very, very important aspects of all this. It's almost like when you put gas in a car, right? Or the function of a car, you can't just put gas in a car for a car to go, right? The engine's got to be good. You've got to have oil in the engine. You've got to be taking care of the transmission. So everything could be working in one part of the vehicle, but if something's not working in another part of it, the whole vehicle either is not going to run or it won't run as efficiently. And that's what we want in our lives, right? We want to be able to grow. We want to be able to see the efficiency of where we're trying to go. Or we want to be able to have efficiency in where we're trying to go and see the fruit of that in our lives. So I want to start with really just the nature of growth. And I think to really start here effectively, growth is an ongoing process. Okay. Growth is an ongoing process, not just a finished product. I know we tend to look at growth as a finished product because it's always, these highlight reels of, other people that we see on social media. We look at where they started and where they are. It's kind of like the whole thing of, how it started, how it's going, or before and after photos. Like everybody loves the before and after photos, but we don't necessarily like the in-between period. And I think the thought for this podcast episode really developed from an experience I had last night. I was at one of my friend's birthday events over in Venice Beach. Shout out Isaiah Hilt. Shout out my boy out there. Dude is doing some incredible, awesome things, bringing the community together out there at the skate park, and just seeing what he was doing yesterday, using his birthday as an opportunity to bring a bunch of people together. Man, love you, bro. Shouting you out over here on the podcast. Definitely going to have him on at some point. So Isaiah, if you're listening to or watching this, you're already a guest. You don't get a choice. You're coming on to the show, okay? So with that being said, I was turning into a parking spot. I left my hazards on so that people could, go around me, and I forgot to turn them off when I parked. So I'm there. I'm at the boardwalk. I'm at the skate park for hours and hours and hours. And when I get back to my car, I go to start my car, and my car's completely dead. I thought I had my jumper cables in the trunk, but I'd actually lent them to my brother. I believe it was my brother or one of my friends, a couple of months ago. And for me, I don't encounter a dead battery all the time with my car or situations like that, which that's a point of growth for me right there, right? Just double checking in that area, making sure I'm prepared. So I'm just being transparent with y'all right now as we're talking about this. It's an opportunity for me to be like, hey, yes, something beautiful came out of this, but you need to be more prepared moving forward to make sure that, you're not stuck in a situation without the proper tools to get out of it. But with that being said, I ended up walking over to this guy. He was standing out on his front porch, and I walked over and I was like, hey man, like, do you have any jumper cables or anything like that? I'm trying to, basically get my car jump started. And from me asking him that question, we ended up having an almost 2 hour, I think it was near 2 hour conversation where we were talking about this very topic today, how he was dealing with some stuff in his life. He had just had a really, really rough breakup, and he was evaluating some changes that he needed to make in his life. And he was talking to me about how uncomfortable it was to start making some changes, that he was realizing, hey, I am not where I think that I am, and I'm not where I want to be. And it was just me standing out there with this 16-year-old kid having this really, really profound conversation in which what he shared to me actually opened up my eyes and made me realize some areas of my life that I'm like, hey, man, this dude is spitting wisdom. He's spitting facts, talking about what he wants for the future. And so we were able to talk about some of these aspects of making changes and being committed to change and removing people out of your life that are not mirroring the type of change that you are looking to experience. And so that pretty much led me to having a conversation with y'all today about this. He talked about feeling uncomfortable with change. And that's something that I want to talk about with this first part of the podcast. There is a discomfort in evolving, even though we look at the end destination and we want to see that evolution take place, right? And so I want to talk with y'all a little bit about what brings about change in our psychology. So when it comes to habits, and this is just looking at our neural circuit in our brain, habits form in our lives through the habit loop. You can look this up. This article, by the way, is from here, let me make sure I actually have it right over here so I can bring this up for you. This is from the National Institute of Health, so NIH.gov. You can look this up. It's called the Neuroscience of Habit and Purposeful Behavior. And I'm always going to put links in here for y'all to have information. You can read this for yourselves. But habit formations form through what is called a habit loop. So it's a cue, something will trigger you, right? Then you go into a routine, which is the behavior, and then a reward, which is the outcome. Typically, it's a positive outcome or one that makes you more prone to participate in that behavior again. Now, there are two different parts of your brain. I know I'm holding up 4 fingers right now, but there's 2 different parts of your brain that operate with this, okay? The prefrontal cortex is one, and the basal ganglia is the other. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision-making and self-control when starting a new habit. And we talked about this on the last episode where it's like, when you start out doing certain things, new behaviors, you think you're in control of those behaviors, whether positive or negative. You're like, oh, it's okay. I have 1 drink, 2 drinks, whatever, it's fine. And then as you continue to progress, where you start feeling better because that drink might make you feel a little bit more relaxed, more socially, more socially at ease if you deal with anxiety, social anxiety. And you start thinking, oh, it's okay. I'll have 1 shot here, 2 shots here or whatever. And I'm not going to start depending on this, right? So that is your prefrontal cortex, right? But what ends up happening is that as you begin to feel more at ease, feel more yourself, feel more at peace in those types of high anxiety situations, your basal ganglia starts taking over as your habits strengthen, and it makes the behavior or the desire for the behavior more automatic. It becomes a subconscious process than it does a conscious effort. And just like it takes conscious effort for you to start a habit and then it become routine through your basal ganglia, it is the exact same way when it comes to unlearning behaviors and learning new ones. The good thing about it is that there's something called neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability, if you're open and you allow it to happen, it is your brain's ability to actually grow and to make new decisions and for you to become a new person or grow into what you want. Excuse me. And so with that being said, you look at it and you say to yourself, okay, if through repetition, I'm strengthening my neural pathway, if I can do that towards negative practices or behaviors that actually can hurt me, how much more so if I can do it towards behaviors that are making my life better? Okay? So another part that we have to look at with this is dopamine. Your brain actually, because it's not just behaviors and it's not just doing the action and then these things just become automatic, right? It also has to do with the chemical release that takes place in your brain once said action is completed, right? So your brain releases dopamine typically by saying, okay, this makes me feel good. So if I'm feeling really, really socially anxious and I go and, I smoke a joint, or I go and I take a shot or have several drinks, right? All of those things, if they're, of course, legal, I don't dog any of those things. Everybody, can do as they please. I personally don't like dependence on any substance for me to be able to function, because if it's something that's not operating within me or I haven't worked on myself to develop that, then what ends up happening is I'm going to develop a dependence on said behavior, on said substance, whatever. And at the end of the day, you want to always be able to be in control of yourself, where you don't have to depend on something. I would always hear, especially when I was in college, I would always hear guys be like, yeah, bro, like, I need to have a couple of drinks before, like they would see a girl across the room and they'd be like, oh yeah, dude, I want to go talk to that girl or whatever. But, I don't know, I haven't had enough shots yet. I got to like work my way up. They would always be like, liquid courage, right? And I would always look at them and be like, bro, solid courage is better than liquid courage. And they would kind of look at me a little bit like, huh? I'm like, what I'm basically telling you is if it's not obvious, like your own personal courage, right, is better than you relying on some other substance to make you feel the courage to do something, right? And I just want to share that with you today. What in your life are you supplementing courage, or you're supplementing peace from, or you're supplementing strength from, that if you would just take a step back and look at where you can grow it within yourself, where you can actually work on it and face your fear, could you be a better person? Because just getting through life by having alternative ways and methods of medicating your fears or medicating your lack of courage is not going to grow you. And that's why I always tell people and myself, it's like, dude, if I keep making excuses for why I'm not growing, or if I keep telling myself, oh, it's just them, or if I keep essentially taking psychological, emotional, or habit Advil, so to speak, where I'm masking the symptoms, right, but not dealing with the issue. It's like if you break something, but all you do is just take painkillers, but you don't actually address the broken part of your body. That part of your body is still going to be broken. And if anything, whatever you're using to numb the pain, if you're still continuing to walk through the world and function through the world on that broken part of your body, it actually can make it worse. So it might feel triggering. It might feel difficult. It might feel, kind of confronting in a sense to address those things head on and feel the pain of having to reset it, right? Or uncomfortable to have it in the cast, right, of your emotional life, or feeling a little bit of, brokenness because of what you're now confronting that has not been addressed for so long and the aftermath that it's left in its wake. But if you actually can begin to address the problem, you actually are going to feel a lot better about the solution that comes from it. And you can look back and say, I used to have that issue, or that thing used to be broken in me, but I'm not broken. And then you can help to be a pathway for other people to grow through your story, through your experience. And so it's just important to look at these things and understand hey, we're all capable of growing. We're all capable of doing so. But it's just being open to look at ourselves and say, what's more important? Me wanting to protect myself in my brokenness, or me wanting to grow from this place of brokenness and become greater as a result of it, become stronger as a result of it, and not medicate my pain, medicate my misery, right? So it's really, really important, as I mentioned before, to understand this from a psychological perspective. But here's where the just neuroscientific part shifts into a part where we have to make decisions, right? Because courage is not just being fearless, right? A lot of people think that having courage means that you don't feel any fear. I believe that the true definition of courage is feeling fear, and yet in the face of fear, making a decision to move forward. It's making a decision to face it and say, you know what? I don't know what's on the other side of what I'm dealing with right now, but I'm going to take a conscious step towards what I want. And I'm going to face it every step of the way. I'm going to do it 50% sure. I might even do it with one eye open. But I'm moving toward, and I'm going through, not trying to get around or go above. I'm going through it. Because you're not developed by avoiding your pain. You're not developed by avoiding things that make you afraid. You're developed by facing things that make you afraid. Addressing and confronting those challenges head on. And sometimes we do need help. Sometimes we do need motivation. Sometimes we do need strength. But you're never going to get somewhere unless you go somewhere. And you will never arrive at a new destination if you want to stay stuck at your old starting point. You have to make a conscious effort to move forward, even with all of the fears that you're experiencing. And I want to give you guys a couple examples of this because, as I mentioned before, I'm very, very big on practicality. So there's different types of courage. A lot of times we look at courage as, you see videos online of someone that might walk into like a convenience store or a bank, trying to rob a bank or whatever, and somebody steps in and they take on the person with a weapon. Or we see somebody that's rushing into a burning building, right? We have these profiles in courage, or standing up to a grotesque authoritarian bullying figure, right? And those are all examples of courage. But I want to give you an example of courage, or examples of courage that you might face in your everyday life that's not where your life is at risk, right? Here are a couple of examples here, and I'm going to pull this up. Let me go ahead and bring up this window here. So this is from Positive Psychology, and this article is Insights, or it's called Positive Psychology, Courage, an Essential Virtue for Authentic Living. And these are the 5 different types of courage that I want to talk to you about. The first type of courage is physical courage. And physical courage is the first one we just talked about, that involves facing a physical danger or adversity. So acts of bravery, running into a burning building, putting your life at risk, such as fighting in the military, or, defending somebody else from being harmed, fighting off a bully, etc. Right? That's the one that I think we're most familiar with in terms of what we see in courageous profiles. The second type is moral courage. And the moral courage aspect is standing up for what you believe is right in the face of social pressure, ridicule, or personal risk. So for example, when you look at what happened with MLK, when MLK was like, listen, this is an injustice that is facing the Black community. I am going to go out there. I'm going to risk my life. So it's a form of physical courage and moral courage. And it's possible, by the way, for you to be doing all 5 of these at one time. But I want to break them down individually. Standing up for civil rights, and from a rhetorical perspective, but also willing to face violence for what he believed was right, and so many others that were with him. This is an example of moral courage. Moral courage is standing up sometimes even on a job where your career might be under the gun, standing up to a boss, right? Or somebody that has a higher position of power, or standing up for someone that is being treated unfairly in the workplace, or in any social circle. That is basically acting in alignment, deciding what your values are and acting in accordance with that, right? Another form of courage is advocating for other people, standing up against injustice, so forms of protest, challenging social norms, taking risk in relationships and social settings are examples of social courage. So this could look like you actually, protesting, as I mentioned. This could look like you challenging societal norms. Everybody is saying that this particular way of behaving is okay, but you're saying, you know what? No, personally, my morals say this is not okay. Or you stand up for how you're, being treated. Stand up against somebody, or stand up to somebody rather, for how you're being treated in a friendship, a relationship, or in a social setting, right? You might see somebody that might be being bullied in a social setting, whether it's for their race, for their sexual, identification, for their orientation, and you stand up for that person, right? That's a form of social courage. Another form of courage is intellectual courage. And this is the courage to challenge your own beliefs, explore new ideas, engage in critical thinking, even when it's uncomfortable. This is the type of courage that I think, frankly, we need more in our culture today. It's the courage to have somebody challenge your belief, to have somebody say something to you that is opposite from your typical day-to-day algorithmic comfort zone, and get you to really have or engage in a new form of thinking about your perspectives, right? So this is intellectual courage. And I think personally, and I just want to say this very, very briefly for the record, I think that right now in our culture, we do need to be challenging our own perspectives more. We're so stuck in the algorithm of our own beliefs. And I'm not just talking about political beliefs, religious beliefs, etc. There are a lot of social ideas and even ideas about change in psychology that I think are actually more paralyzing than they are empowering. And I've talked about this many times in this podcast. People just being like, oh, well, maybe the way that you feel, just embrace your feelings, embrace how you feel and live in that. And that's true. In some ways, it's okay for us to embrace it. But that is a starting point and not a stopping point. You're not supposed, if you're feeling, if you feel lazy, like you don't want to do something, yes, you need to listen to your body and be like, okay, why do I feel this way? Maybe you need to take a break. But there are days where you have to push through your own laziness. You have to push through your own apathy. You have to push through and have the courage to get over your own feeling of being stuck. Because nobody ever became great by just listening to their feelings. Nobody ever became great by just living within the realm of their impulses. And that is why we have to use our own ability. We have to use the power of our brain, of our prefrontal cortex, to be like, yo, I can make a decision. Even when my basal ganglia is telling me this is who I am, it's already decided that because of some of my habits. My prefrontal cortex, combined with all the other dreams that I have and the goals that I have, I can say, nope, this stops today. And so that's what I'm talking about. It's just an example of being caught within our own intellectual safety zones and our own emotional confinements that make us feel comfort is not a healthy thing. Ultimately, we have to zoom out and look at our thoughts as not being us, but being the ecosystem in which we have allowed them to thrive. So I want you to start thinking of it like this. Think of your brain, instead of thinking of your brain as you, think of your brain as an ecosystem. Think of your brain as a garden. So you can look around, you can see, okay, there's some really, really awesome roses that are growing over here. I've got some squash on this side, some tomatoes on this side. I've got some grapes and some apples. Really, like you have an orchard, you have a garden. You have tons of different plants. And in different parts of your brain or your life, they're really, really great. But then you can look and say, okay, wait a minute. There are some bad fruits that have grown here because they've spoiled. They've gone unattended. Or if I'm looking, there are some weeds that are getting mixed up into the good soil that my ground is on. If you start thinking of your life as being a garden or an orchard or being a field that produces a harvest, then what you can do is say, wait a minute, I'm zooming out and I'm taking a step back. I am the gardener. I am the one that tends to this. I am the farmer. And when you start thinking about your life that way, now you don't feel as helpless. You can look at what grew and what's working. You can look at what didn't grow and what's not working, or what got choked out or what you didn't tend to. And you can have the courage and the empowerment to make decisions to make your life better. So start thinking of your life. You are not your thoughts. You are not your ecosystem. You tend to your thoughts like a gardener, and you are in charge of managing your ecosystem. Think of it that way, okay? Going back over here now, we're going to look at this last one, and this one is so important. It is emotional courage. Emotional courage is so important because it involves facing our inner fears with vulnerabilities, confronting difficult emotions, expressing feelings honestly, or coping with loss. And then, of course, they have a link to a TED Talk by Susan David. You can always go ahead and look that up. My whole point of mentioning this here to you guys is if we look at aspects and areas in our life where we can push forward, it begins to be something that once you recognize you have the power and you have the control, you're not a victim of your circumstance. You may have been a victim in your circumstance. Let's be clear. You are not a victim of your circumstance. You may have been a victim in your circumstance, but you have the power to grow, to change, and to develop from your circumstance. And so I just want to encourage y'all today, look at all these aspects of courage. Look at emotional, look at professional, look at personal, look at physical, and look at intellectual courage and say, in what area of my life can I make strides towards every day showing up, even if I feel barely brave? Can I look at areas of my life, excuse me, where I can take that bravery, whatever little that I have, and make big leaps with it? I believe that's so important. I believe that's key to us living the life that we want. And I'll just say this before I move on to the final section here. There is such an importance in resilience, but also in failure. And I want to be clear about failure because I know we've talked about that a decent amount here on the podcast in our first season. Failure is not, or change and success is not just about failing. Change and success is not just about failing. Change and success is about failing and learning from it. It's about failing and realizing, here's where I made mistakes. Here's how I can be more efficient. Sometimes I hear people say, oh, you just got to fail. Like, just make all these kinds of mistakes. Make any kind of mistake. That's how you're going to learn. But if you really think about it, high-level athletes, people that are trying to win in business, people that even lose elections, in politics, whatever it is you're doing, right? Even if you had a failure in your relationship, as far as I'm concerned, if you really want to succeed at that, no one's just like, oh, okay, I'm really, really good at dunking or driving the ball into the paint or scoring inside of the three-point line, but my three-point shot sucks. So I'm just going to not develop that. If you really want to be a high-level athlete, that doesn't make any sense. So it's always saying, okay, what am I doing that's causing me to miss the target? And working on that. And that's why failure, when you take that shot and you miss, you can either be like, oh, you know what? This is not my game. I'm not a three-point shooter. I suck at this. Or you can say, I'm really, really good at all these other things. How can I do tiny little things to strengthen my game? How can I practice my shot? Analyze it. Get really, really acquainted with how to do it better, and then just practice and put in reps. I think if we took that attitude towards failure, we would actually see ourselves grow out of failure instead of make excuses for why this is who we are, where we are, and what we are. Just a thought. You have to be able to fail and be resilient, but you have to also learn from that failure, because failure, learning, application, consistency, and resilience are all parts of success. That's how you get there. So let's just move on to this final section here. How do we recognize when we're resisting growth? Because all this might sound good to you. You might even be like, you know what, Joseph, this sounds fantastic. I'm learning a lot from it, but how do I recognize when I'm resisting growth, right? How do I recognize when I'm resisting it? One of the biggest tells I could say for sure, when I'm resisting growth in my life, or when I don't want to engage in growth in my life, even though I know that I need to do something and I feel the energy to do it, is when I start in my brain telling myself all the reasons why it's not possible for me. That's a really, really big indicator that, at least for me, and I'm sure you can probably relate, but I've heard this from other people as well. A big indicator in your life is when you know you need to do something, you've even stepped out towards doing it, but on the particular day that you need to take that next step to go to the next level, you start making excuses for why it's not possible, or that feeling of, I can't do it, or I don't need to do this, or why should I? Like, isn't there a better or easier way? That's a pretty clear indicator that you are resisting change and growth in your life. And so a practical way to push through this, I talked about this on the last episode. Whenever you feel like you want to go and repeat a particular habit or cycle, acknowledge the feeling, but don't engage in the function. I know we talked about that last time. Another way to do that is to be self-aware. So every time you're taking steps, are you a person that gets really, really kind of obsessed with the flashiness of starting? Like, I did it, I began, I went to the gym, I got those first couple of workouts under my belt, but I didn't continue. Is that your story? I've been there before. Sometimes I find myself doing that, where I'll get caught up in like the flashiness of, okay, I'm starting, I'm beginning, I feel good, the equipment I got, it's new. I started doing the new habit. I got all the stuff that I needed for it. But is that activation energy continuing into consistent habit where it becomes like second nature, right? So have self-awareness and then write down what you're going to do, or talk to yourself in the middle of your workout. I love doing this. When I'm in the middle of a workout and I don't feel like I want to continue, while I'm in the middle of doing my workout, like let's say I'm doing a really, really tough like chest day, leg day, shoulders, whatever. And I'm like, oh man, in my head, I don't want to do this. I start telling myself, even if I don't want to do this podcast on a particular day, because there are some days that I don't feel like doing this, but I tell myself, oh man, this episode is going to not only be good for me to get this off my chest, but this could help somebody else. So start telling yourself, hey, this is going to be good for me. And then start telling yourself what comes after that workout. So when you finish one workout, be like, oh, I'm going to do the next one. I'm excited to do the next one. This is going to make me stronger. Sometimes you got to start having conversations with yourself. You've got to start speaking, because your words are powerful. And the words that you speak are like activation energy into the atmosphere. I truly believe there is life and there is death in what you say. And our words are more powerful than we realize. So you got to use your words in the right direction. Start speaking that stuff out into existence. It's very powerful. And then, as many times as you can, lean into discomfort. Lean into discomfort. Find opportunities to get uncomfortable, because your comfort zone that you now reside in was once an uncomfortable place. Your comfort zone that you currently live in right now, that friendship that you have, that best friendship that you have right now that you've had for years, you might have felt even anxious to go approach that person. That big opportunity, those gains in your fitness, the change that's happening in your life, it all once used to be an uncomfortable place that you now find to be the most comfortable zone that you're in, even when you run into difficulty in it. So you've got to learn to embrace and lean into discomfort. So write down one thing that makes you uncomfortable this week. Maybe it's saying hi to the cashier at the grocery store. Maybe it's having a difficult conversation with a friend, right? Maybe you can do 10 reps and you're only doing 6 or 8. Lean into the discomfort of trying to get there. Aim for failure every single time. Aim to go all the way to your limits, not stopping short of your limits. I believe you're going to recognize new strengths that you never thought that you possibly had before, right? And then breaking habits. How do we weaken the neural circuit when it comes to bad habits, right? As I mentioned before, you've got to have, some of these are goal directed. It's you set goals towards what you want and you're actively working towards that. And then some of them are stimulus driven. You're like, hey, I want to feel better. So because I want to feel better, I'm getting up today and I'm going to the gym. Versus not just, oh, I want to, be bigger or be stronger or lose weight. But you're like, I don't feel good today. I'm going to go and I'm going to work out because I need to feel better. Right? You also want to weaken that system, right? Shift things from just your subconscious to your conscious decision-making process. until the conscious becomes subconscious and the subconscious becomes conscious. There's a quote, and I love this. I love this quote. I believe it was by Carl Jung who said this. Okay, here we go. I love this quote. It's a quote by Carl Jung. And he said, until you make the subconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. How many of us are having that experience where we think that everything that's happening in our lives right now, oh, it's just fate. I hear people say all the time, it's just my personality. It's just when I was born. It's my star sign. A lot of that is nonsense. You have the power to make changes in your life and see a better result. But are you making the subconscious conscious? And are you making the conscious subconscious? Are you looking at your, are you looking at your subconscious actions and saying, I need to consciously make decisions to uproot this habit out of my life? And are you looking at the conscious and saying, these habits, I'm going to keep practicing them, and they will become part of my subconscious experience. They'll become automatic. I believe if we did that, we begin to identify and modify triggers of unwanted habits, because it's not just our behavior. It's not about the fruit on the tree. It's about the root underneath. What is causing me to make these decisions? And then if we actively begin to create processes that help us to either avoid or defeat these triggers, temptations, desires that are not helping us to be better, I believe that we would begin to see change in our life at a rapid rate. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I'll end with this. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and she was telling me about how, I want to, I want to change my habits, because we were talking about life cycles, right? And she's like, she texted me and she's like, I want a donut right now, but I know that I shouldn't eat this donut. I'm having a craving right now. And it was so interesting to me because she was like, I went online, I watched this video, and it was about this guy who cut sugar completely out of his life. And he said he felt so much better for it. And I think that's great. I actually really thought that was great that she chose not to do that, even though she wanted to, because that's one step of her saying, I am getting control in this area in my life. But what I also told her is, in that area of your life, what if you replaced artificial and unhealthy sugar? Because listen, I'm a sweet tooth too. I don't have problems with you have some dessert here and there, because it's all about balance, right? But what if you replaced that artificial sugar with something that was a natural sugar? What if instead of you reaching for the donut, you reach for an apple? What if instead of you reaching for the donut, you reach for, an orange or grapes or a mango or something? What if instead of you having that desire for something that is artificial and not healthy for you, you replaced it with something that was good for you? And I just want to encourage y'all with that today. Change in our life and having the courage to change is not just about what we remove from our life. It is about what we replace it with in our life. So all those negative thoughts, replace them with positive thoughts. When you feel tempted to speak negatively, I suck, my life's not great, I'm not going anywhere, this person, I hate that. Begin to find reasons to be positive in your life about yourself and about your situation. I never have enough money. I'm ugly. I'm all these things. If you begin to speak more positively, if you replace processed foods with healthy foods, If you want to have sugar, and instead of going and getting candy, right? But you go say, hey, listen, I'm going to get dried fruit or trail mix or something like that. Yeah, of course, it's going to take your prefrontal cortex first to do it. But pretty soon, your basal ganglia is going to be like, hey, throw me them dried mangoes, man. That's what I want. You might even see that craving completely disappear in your life. But having the courage to get rid of bad habits is not just about eliminating the bad. It is also about replacing it with the good and having the motivation to continue once you see that that habit is benefiting your life. I believe that would make a great change, and I believe you would love it. So with that being said, y'all, listen, growth requires discomfort, courage, and persistence. I want you this week to take one area of your life, find out where you need to embrace growth. Just one area. I don't want you to do 5 because you may not have all the activation energy for that. But find one area of your life, take one small action, and share it with me. Go ahead and hit me up, shoot me a DM, leave me a comment @_fullcirclepod on Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe to us. Don't forget to share this with a friend. Don't forget to share it with your mama, your daddy, your sister, your cousin, your auntie, your uncle, whoever. I appreciate the time that y'all have taken to listen to this podcast episode. I believe in you. We're all on this journey together. I know I'm on the journey, and everything I'm sharing with y'all is stuff that I'm going through in my own life. But remember, as I said at the top of this episode, growth is the great challenge that requires great courage. Take the step. You're a champion. You got this. Have a great one from your favorite brother. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.